This is your orchestration tutor, Thomas Goss, bringing you the first of 10 dotted brev/longa entries for the 2019 Orchestration Challenge, which is to orchestrate the Seamstress by Modest Mussorgsky. So, most of the entries were limited to the first 13 bars, and some of the Patreon entries were also for portions, like the minimum was for the first 13 bars, but with an individual video and a little bit more intense evaluation style, and then the semi-brev, a little bit more, and the brev was for more than half of the piece, and now the dotted brev/longa level entries are for the entire work. So this is going to take just a little bit of, I'm going to very methodically try to go through each section, give it its due, and talk about it in context, and not repeat myself too much, hopefully. So this first one is from Alberto, and it's really a great score. I just, I really like your native style, Alberto, just kind of what, your instinctual way of doing things. It's not too different from mine. I mean, we have our own voice, but I sense a lot of similarity of influence of orchestration, and it's kind of really cool to see. That having said that, it's completely different from mine, and that's also great too. I really like the way that the harp underlines a little bit of flute. Once again, we're seeing the flute come in right at the beginning. But then we get this, this little pacing, of these two pitches kind of bouncing off of each other. The best thing about this beginning approach is how integrated it is. Yes, there's dovetailing of functions and so on between the instruments. There is doubling and trading off and everything else. But some orchestrations have taken that approach and not quite had it all wrapped up together. Do you know what I mean? It was just a little too piecemeal. This approach is very well integrated with the harp playing off of these little pitches here, as I mentioned before, and the strings keeping up patterns that aren't too hard to play. See, this is very similar to what I did. The two top pitches, and then the next two pitches, and then the cello bringing this in. Now, Alberto is going divisi here just to get an extra voice, and that's perfectly fine. Though, just to point one thing out, is that this pitch right here, like most of these pitches, could have been played as double stops on just on a standard violin or viola, and then that would give you the voice you need, or it could have been divisi as well, right? Because it's not that big of a roll, so you wouldn't have needed to go divisi on your cellos. Anyways, just something to point out. There's also something really cool here, and that is the way that this little bum 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 is turned into a little bit of contrary motion, apparent contrary motion in the double bass, right? It seems to, although it's really, to all intents and purposes, it's really within the, it's kind of within what's going on with this little gesture here, except for, obviously, there isn't a C right here, and this A is taking the place of the F. It still feels, just really still feels like the bass is sort of pulling apart slightly, and that is kind of what you need here. The A2 bassoons are going to stand out a little bit. Everything else is pretty balanced, right? You've got two flutes plus oboe, so I can see why you feel the need to balance this here. But I would just point out that these three wind instruments are being doubled by the first violins, right? Whereas there is kind of no doubling here on the bassoons. It does kind of blend in a little bit in a sort of just everybody going along in the same direction kind of way. But in a live situation, this will stick out a little bit. Okay, not to say that it's not balanced. It's just it's noticeable, maybe more noticeable than you were thinking in terms of its own texture. Okay, and then once again we see this same approach here of the strings starting off soft and then going to a crescendo with some winds, coming in and the rest of the string section, and then mezzo forte from there to sforzando with larger groups, especially coming in right on the trill and then going downhill. That's all good. And good idea to leave out the trill in the lower strings, although you could have just as easily left it out of the bassoons here, right? And that would just make for a kind of a clearer gesture overall. Now, one thing that I want to point out before I turn the page, and that is the alto saxophone, which seems like, sort of like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Sir not appearing in this film, but the alto saxophone does appear later on, in just right towards the end, which is kind of cool. But I sort of feel like I would have liked to have heard it somewhere on the first page, right? So that there would be a bit of a kind of a book ending, right? You heard it at the beginning, then you hear it at the end, kind of a thing. I mean, it's really cool to bring it in right at the very end, but it's also kind of neat. I mean, even if you just brought the saxophone in to double or support or do some kind of function so that they had a chance to kind of warm up their chops a little bit before they played their solo, that would have been maybe a little preferable. I don't know. Anyways, but it's a cool idea to use this. There were, I think, 3 or 4 scores ultimately that used alto saxophone in cool ways, and this is one of them, which we will see when I get to that particular section. Now here on the next page, we see that same strategy here, which kind of has the same thing. the middle winds coming in to emphasize what everybody else is doing. And along to that, we've got rips up on the harp, and I think you're trying to tell the harpist, hey, damp the strings right here. Okay, usually the harpist will put that in themselves. Now here in this, like the proper place for this diagram is right here, right? So if you insist on putting in the damp, like if you want them to damp by a certain beat, that's fine. But like you wouldn't want to tell them to change their markings before they damped, right? So it's just a logistical problem. You want to put that here. And you also want to check to see that there is enough time for them to change things around. They might actually put this right here and then start changing around their pedals, because this is actually pretty fast, right? Pretty fast music. So in order to change the couple of pedals that they might need to, they'll probably put this before. And like, who is going to really hear the sustain of the harp all that much with all of this bustling stuff going on in the foreground, right? Probably nobody. Now, this right here, you probably noticed that it was difficult to hear in the mock-up, and that will be true in real life, right? So just, these are kind of unimportant. If these pitches are all that important to you, give them to some other instrument, because they're not going to be heard very much, if at all, on the harp. Now, if you want to make them stand out a bit, you could make them go up a couple of octaves, an octave or two, and then roll them, right? And then they'll stand out from the busy texture, but still not all that much. Now, if you are using Sibelius correctly in terms of like their instrument changes, then it will say flute 1 or whatever you decide to put right here instead of PICC, right? So right here it should say like 1 or 2 or whatever. And then to piccolo, and then from thenceforth, from where the piccolo starts, it should say piccolo in the left margin, but right here it should say 1. So you might have done something wrong there. So just watch out for that in the future, because if I were a conductor and I was looking at this, I would say, oh yeah, this is the piccolo now. Why isn't the second player playing the piccolo? Right? So just watch out for those kinds of little layout bugaboos. All right, and then we have the oboe being accompanied by lower winds, and that actually is going to work out great the way that you have got this all scored. Okay, a little bit, I mean, you've really got the clarinet in the background, so that helps right in here because it's sort of sitting on the same pitches. Okay, and the bassoon in this supportive position is going to work perfectly with the oboe. So, up to A, it's looking pretty good. Moving on from there, we can see that when the theme makes its next entrance, that it is really similar to before. I mean, there are a few little differences here and there, but it's pretty much treated in the same way. And it's neat to have the piccolo come in like this, just a little bit of kind of chirpy sound right over the rest of the main theme here. We've got our divisi. Yeah, so you want your arco strings to sort of trade off. There kind of is no need for you to do this at all, right? It's just completely unnecessary because you're just going to get a sort of a thinner sound, right? Which against the oboes will. I mean, I don't know if that's really what you need there. I think it's sufficient enough just to have these players in unison until right here, and then you can have some pizzicato kind of helping out. Or it would have been easier for you just to have these pitches here. Like you've already got the D sharp here in the second violin, then a G sharp octave here, right? It would have just been easier to keep these pizzicato tones in the second violins, right? Because you've already got the D sharp here. Just have this all unison, right? And then D sharp, maybe put like a tenuto mark if you want it especially kind of firm right there, and then just turn this into an octave. and you're cool. So I think that would just is a less fussy way of dealing with this particular part right here. Now, I mean, the harp for the harp to do, you're giving the harp the responsibility almost completely of playing this. It's basically this is doubled by viola, and so is the last pitch. It would be better if the violas just did this as pizzicato, and the harp played octaves of the top voice. You would actually hear something. But with the way that this is just really playing firmly here, like with all of these voices put together, the harp is going to disappear. So it just, I mean, you could just you could just leave this beat completely as a rest if you wanted to, and you get the same exact effect. This would be the place to put in, like, say, vibes or glockenspiel or celesta or something like that would stand out a little bit better. But unless you particularly underline something here by, like, say, adding an octave to the top voice, then it's sort of not really needed. Okay. I mean, but otherwise pretty cool. Like, the rest of the orchestration there is really nice. I really do like that. Gets my stamp of approval. I like the way that you're trading off on some of these voices. What I might suggest here is second oboe, or actually first oboe coming in. That's all good. Then second oboe on the bottom, and then just have the first oboe play the bum ba da bump, right? And that way you're just leaving the most obvious things to different players, right? Rather than this kind of sort of dividing constantly one to the other, right? It's just, it's just easier on, like, they're like, what are they going to have to articulate? When are they going to play it and everything else, right? Okay, and then once again, really nice bass line. Really like that a lot. Okay, and now we're starting to get into the development, sort of like setting up things to come, right? With Mussorgsky's particular approach. So this is all pretty nicely done, I would say. Yeah, and I like the sort of conversation between the string groups. That's all nice. Okay, and I really like this, dividing up these real fast passages, right? So that it doesn't just put all the burden on one player, right? So you've got your violas, and then your second violins. This is all, I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it is way simpler than having to play the entire this entire gesture all the way through. And it's really good to just cut that pitch out here and then just have the players continue on. So that was some good string scoring there, I would say. And yeah, and this is all pretty doable and sort of builds on what they're already doing. Right? And just adding a little bit of support from the wind groups as you go. That's all quite good. All right. And then we're getting into these sort of rippling accompaniments, and it's also very nice that you are, like, giving the harpist a break. You are giving the strings a break here, and you're just kind of focusing on instruments that can play that sort of stuff very well, like the clarinets, are perfect for that. And then just the the bassoon going up to, these patterns are going to be fine. You should tell us if this is going to be A2 or 1 or 2, right? Just that this could have gone over here or whatever you would have decided to do there. Yeah, so this is all, that's all pretty good. I mean, not too different from what I did as well. Like, I'm seeing some resonances there, some relationship there in some of our ideas. This is very doable. Yeah, anything from G down is just really playable. It can be very fluid too, depending on whether or not you understand bassoon fingering. And it's good to have this trade-off here, going between the clarinets. I would say, like, once again, try to have the same player do the same thing in most cases, right? So this, like, if you're going to have the second player play this, have the second player play this as well, right? So just so that they just kind of do the same thing twice, because they're, it just has to do with articulation and expectation and just being prepared, having done it well the first time, you just do it well the second time. as opposed to just like trading off between the players, which doesn't really make any difference, right? If it doesn't save anybody's breath, then it's kind of not really worth trading off. Okay, and then we've got these unison here, like two oboes plus clarinet, and then harmonizing. See, like you just have one flute. So this might be a better place for you to go, like the oboes in harmony. First oboe taking the top voice to double with the flute to strengthen it, and then second oboe doubling with the clarinet. That would be a better way of getting a balance right there. Okay, and then that little note there from the this little joining in here from the piccolo is just very charming. Neat idea. Which takes us to our little mini apotheosis here, where things wind down to kind of an uncertain, just really sounds triumphant, and then it's winding down into an uncertain area. And here we go, some really good harp scoring, okay? If you're going to mark forte in a sort of semi-tutti like this, and like worth pointing out, your tuttis are much easier to manage because you don't have any brass at all, okay? So bravo. Nothing to slight the brass, but if you're using this much harp, then it's a good idea. Okay, so this is, so this is all going to be okay. I mean, there's some sort of changes that need to happen a little abruptly, and there's some strange, like, is this just a, okay, so that was just a, yeah, okay, so I don't understand how, I guess that you just put a symbol in there for that particular accidental. Okay, so this is going to be fine. You just need to mark it up to fortissimo, okay? And then you'll get that rippling sound. And, this is just like adding the two together. You definitely will feel the dropout of the piccolo from right around here. And, then, coming to an end here, we're sort of like the end of that other part. It's really where you need some ritardando, right? Now, it's more, fermata is not going to be enough. Like if you listen to the piano interpretations, you'll hear the pianists tending to kind of bring their ideas to a close with a little bit of ritardando, even though it's not in the score, right? And that happens in a lot of transcriptions. It's just easier for the conductor as well, and there's the players to kind of have things more punctuated in terms of tempo. But but this all works fine, and it's nice, and it's not too different from what I was doing as well. This is very strange though. Sending your double basses so high. I mean, so essentially, this is coming in right under. I mean, look, it would be better for you to do this as like divisi cellos, right, rather than send the double basses up to that high E flat. I mean, it is doable, but it's just, that is a cello note, really. You're gonna get like kind of weak and strained and not really helping out the second bassoon all that much. When you could just like go divisi for the cellos, they would really, both groups would thank you for that, right? Because yes, it's very cool to send the double basses up very high, and they like doing it when there is if there is some reason for them to be exposed, is some intriguing color or whatever that they can be part of. But if they're just kind of doing their bass duties and they're just going up incredibly high, then I would say, in a transcription of a romantic work like this, where, I would just say, watch out. You know what I mean? It just really feels like that's pretty damn high and not really needed all that much, but that's okay. From this point on, Mussorgsky is starting to pile on the Misterioso a little bit, and I felt that this was pretty well done. Like, so long as the player bows, like if you do an up bow here, Or no, actually, sorry, down bow. Down bow, up, and then there is a little bit of time for pizzicato right here, right? So, and so long as this is like soft, you don't have to use too much bow. Yeah, this will pretty much work. I'm sort of imaginary bowing this pluck. Yeah, yeah. So this is doable. Um, yeah, and here this looks so much like a Bartok pizzicato that it sort of immediately gets my radar going. But no, it's just it's I think I might have done this too. This is just touching the octave node and then going pizzicato on the D. So that all works fine. Okay. This this note right here might be a little weird. Okay, and then once again you're just sending the double bass into the stratosphere here. And I just don't know if that's all that advisable. You know. Anyway, I mean, just what would be wrong with like why do you need to transcribe the exact pitch, right? Why does it have to be the exact pitch? It doesn't. Why can't everything just be an octave lower, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with just filling out your orchestra a little bit. You do not have to transcribe the exact thing, right? And then put the players at a disadvantage. Okay, so you've got this sort of sul tasto thing, and once again, you don't really need to do these trade-offs. Do you know what I mean? It's better just to have the whole section playing. I mean, if you were going to have an incredibly delicate texture, then you would want to orchestrate things quite a bit differently. But I mean, I do understand what you're doing here. You're trying to balance things, but you could get the same effect without having to do this, right? So yeah, but I mean, as long as you're putting sul tasto on there anyway. So, but I would say you should put it on everybody, right? Like all the upper strings, viola as well. Okay, and sul tasto to ordinario, and I guess that's okay. It's not really not going to make that much of a difference. Okay, but this is the biggest sin of all right here, mezzo piano to mezzo forte, right? Because you're thinking about this and you're thinking, oh look, I'm going piano to mezzo forte here, so obviously I need to go like from mezzo piano to mezzo forte. It would be better for you just to kill the mezzo piano and end up with mezzo forte, okay? And just let the player figure out where they are in the balance, right? Because mezzo piano to mezzo forte is just like from blah to bleh, right? So you could even get louder here, right? Piano to forte, right? You don't need to do what it says in the piano score. You do not need to do what it infers in the piano score. You are a free orchestrator. All right. Now, I feel that you start to get just really high on some of these pitches, and I mean, it would just be better if you just switch functions here, right? I mean, this line here would sound delicious on second clarinet, whereas these pitches could be, easily held by the first bassoon. It's just, and then you have them jump up here to this F sharp and G. That's okay. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's okay. A lot of this should really be in tenor clef, especially if you're going to send this bassoonist way up there to that high B flat. Okay, I mean that's all totally playable too, but all right. But I mean, not to get too picky about it, but it's not badly orchestrated at all. But there just are some niggling points that I would want us to kind of tweak, right? If I were your copyist or something, or your orchestration coach. Okay, and this is all fun. We got first oboe and flute kind of happily chuckling along here. Same thing, clarinet comes in right there. It sort of changes the color here. And this is really neat. You start doing this groove here, pizzicato, and I think that works really, really well. And then this little build up here, like by the time you get to here, it's all clarinet, right? This is, the players can sort of balance a little bit, but And once again, you're going mezzo forte to mezzo piano. Why not just go down to piano, right? Everybody go down to piano. Piano is a big, big world. Right here, I'm making big circles, right? So here's the big circle of piano. Right over here, there's a little thumbnail sliver, which is pianissimo, triple P, quadruple P, whatever. And then right here in the middle, there's all of this room for piano to do, piano crescendo, piano diminuendo, piano whatever, right? But it is an entire universe, right? And then right over here, there's a little part where the Venn diagram kind of goes over to with the forte part, right? And that's where mezzo forte and mezzo piano live. It's not, it's not this just sort of rungs on a ladder where you go from pianissimo to mezzo forte to forte and so on. I mean, that's not the way that it works. Okay, so go down to piano, right? If you're gonna just really bring down your volume, bring it down to piano, unless it's a background thing, right? If you're supporting some players that are going from forte to mezzo forte, then maybe this would work. Mezzo forte to mezzo piano, if you just wanted to keep right behind them. But it's still problematic. Okay, so I'll shut up about it now. But yeah, this would be much better, like if you're coming from piano, right? And just really not going to hear the flute till right around here to this D, right? And then it will start to join in much more coherently and more balanced. Okay. Now here we just have a problem with bisbigliando. Okay, so all right. So bisbigliando, you just sort of kind of want your harpist to be kind of fluttering around on their pitches. Okay, usually that is between enharmonic pitches. So the left hand is playing, one set of pitches, and the right hand is playing another set of pitches, and then like the kind of rapid strumming between the two creates a whispering sound. But the key word here is whispering. Over here, you're going up to mezzo forte, and that's just not possible, right? It's sort of like, how loud can you whisper, right? Nobody's really going to hear you. So the harpist can, they can pretend to go louder, but it is just sort of like it's kind of like drumming your fingers on a tabletop. There's only so loud your fingers can drum, and that is really the action that they're doing. Their fingers are just sort of twiddling over the strings, right? And creating a very delicate background. Like, you are not going to hear anything coming from that harpist. There's just nothing you can do. You cannot make it any louder. So don't do this, right? Figure out some other kind of thing for the harpist to do, whether it's just little arpeggios that go back and forth or whatever, quickly. That would work out, right? And just like same thing here, this will all disappear. Like, none of this bisbigliando is going to be heard, right? It's whispering. It really is whispering. All right. But meanwhile, everybody else is pretty well orchestrated. I love this little, that's nice. And then when you get to here, like, this is the point where your first flute should jump up and double with the piccolo, because this is just going to, you're so much as at a disadvantage. Like, this is beautifully orchestrated, right? And this right here is, everybody immediately just loses radiance. Do you know what I mean? So if you have first flute doubling the same pitches, not the same written pitches, but the same sounding pitches, so have it jump up an octave and just play this again, but at a softer dynamic. And once again, go down to piano. Don't do this mezzo forte, mezzo piano stuff. Just go down to piano, so you actually have a contour to your dynamic change. Okay, so let's assume this is an octave higher, written sounding an octave higher, so it doubles the piccolo, which is becoming weaker and weaker, right? They're both going down into weak areas. And then just have one single clarinet underneath them, right? Playing this down here, and then all of a sudden everything balances beautifully. But yeah, the background harmony's kind of nice here. I like that. I just really love this whole pizzicato stuff, and right in here, this is great. And then, right here, just, this bisbigliando, like how it could have supported from below would have been so amazing. And then, of course, like right in here is when a lot of people brought out their brass and their percussion and everything else. And you're making a really good try here without having to go to big orchestration, and that's to be recommended. But why does it have to be I mean, you could go to forte here. Do you know what I mean? From piano to forte, and then just fortissimo diminuendo, right? Just really got some. Just don't moderate your dynamics so much. Just really go ahead and push them, right? Otherwise, not bad at all in terms of this orchestration. Just really relying a lot on high bassoon, though, right? Is there some way you can just not send your bassoonist up to A all the time? Or, I mean, it's just not the strongest use of the instrument, right? It's not that it's unplayable or it's bad or anything. It's just, it's just, yeah. There just has to be a way that you could do this with the instruments that you've got, right? Um, yeah, so like, maybe like, this could be, like, you could have your first oboe going back and forth between this E and that G, right? Back and forth. And then then this could be C going down to this E right here, right? And then you can drop this, and the A can end up in the second clarinet, right? So there's just ways around this without having to just always having the bassoonist play in their sort of pale, not very strong area, right? And in big textures like this. Okay, and then this gets down to its little bubbling again, and this is really nicely notated between the clarinet and the first bassoon. That's really great. And this is maybe not going to sound as good as you think it would be, but go ahead, throw it in there. That's all. It's all fine for me. If it works for you, it works for me. From C onward, we are witnessing some of the same elements coming back, used in slightly different ways, which is great. I think that the variation is extremely important. And then, once again, don't do this mezzo piano to mezzo forte. Just put a crescendo mark in there to mezzo forte. All right. I know you're trying to, you've got this other crescendo right in here. And so you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to come in stronger, and then the destination, it'll all sort of feel smooth. Just try to be as simple in your markings as possible, and just really avoid mezzo piano to mezzo forte. I mean, I've said this a bunch of times. Just try to avoid that, and then see where it takes your scoring. All right, the thing to watch out for here is you want a pizzicato on on these natural harmonics. I'm just not sure that really is going to sound all that great. I mean, pizzicato on harmonics usually is something that you hear in, like, say, a string quartet that is extremely modern and textural and everything else, and it's an extremely subtle effect. There is really almost no difference. Like, I mean, you might as well just put in a harmonic to sound A here, right? That would be better on harp than the results that you would get from trying to do pizzicato harmonic on cello. It's just really subtle. And then you're trying to doing the same thing here, kind of plucking on and just look, if just a soft pizzicato is really all you need, right? You don't really need to, I mean, pizzicato harmonics are beautiful, but this isn't really the place for them. It's more of a modernistic kind of a thing where that texture can be really featured and focused on instead of being a background element. Do you know what I mean? It's just right here. It's just not that effectual. It doesn't really accomplish what you might feel that it would. But aside from that, going on, this all sort of comes together pretty well. And here you're kind of using the harp more like a piano. This is once again not going to be heard very much at all, right? It's not going to have that much strength. And here you just really are assuming that the harp has a lot of beef to it, and it just doesn't, right? It cannot compete with the orchestra here. It would be better, like, if you really wanted harp in there, very high pitches would stand out across this texture way better. I like these divisions, like between the instruments. That's very good scoring. Not so sure how fast your double bass player can play something like this and on an average kind of a thing, but it's good that they've got some backing by the bassoons. Here's where I would go a-tu with your bassoons. right? Just to really make sure that you've got enough projection there, and not enough help for your double bassists. But yeah, everything else is kind of cool. But there's just really an assumption that a harp is like a piano, and that this is not going to work. That's not going to work. You can have the harpist play it, but it's just not going to sound like anything against the rest of the orchestra pounding away here. And then this is just totally out. You can't. Harpists can't trill like this. They can trill, but it's very, very soft. It's very backgroundy. It's very slow, and there is lots of they try to trill on pitches that are inharmonic once again, and there's kind of no inharmonic substitute for an A. You can't go double sharp from G, right? There's no way to really kind of do this the way you think it is. The glissando is great, though. Everything else in terms of the orchestration there is fine, though. I think it's nice. I like the way that you stack things and you go up. You really just go for it right here. This is going to be incredibly shrill, like going all the way up there to a B natural on piccolo, flute 2. Okay, well then that's fine. But it's still, yeah, it's going to be really punchy way up there. Yeah, but otherwise, not bad scoring at all. Good solid Tutti scoring for the most part. And here, you don't need to say forte piano subito. That's not needed. Just one or the other, right? But I just say forte piano. So the trill isn't going to work, and neither is niente. Niente, like harps don't do niente. Like niente should just really be something that absolutely, really, like the audience can hear things going down to nothing, and it is really something that you intend them to hear, and they are focusing on that nothingness, right? So technically, your violinists and viola players can go down to subito, but like if the effect is going to be exactly the same as them going down to pianissimo and disappearing, like they just normally would, then just write in the pianissimo, right? Just like don't pull this out. This is sort of like, it's kind of like using a really long fancy word when just a short one would work, right? So just really don't use, please, I'm telling everybody, begging everybody, don't use subito unless you just really absolutely intend that effect to be something that is extremely important to the music and is something everybody, the audience, is completely focusing on, right? And that's not the case here. You're just bringing this down, they're just dying out under the oboes, right? So, but here's our alto saxophone, looking very nice, right? What's a piano to mezzo piano? You don't even need this, right? Same exact thing, right? Just don't use, like, if it's a question of using a marking that just is unnecessary, then leave out the unnecessary marking, right? Just don't give them too much stuff. They will put in whatever energy they're going to put in, right? It's kind of like having training wheels on your training wheels. Do you know what I mean? It's too much. It's kind of like a script where for an actor where after each time after, sometimes you'll see this in scripts where the playwright is trying to tell the actor how to act in every single line that they say. Like they'll say winningly, charmingly, happily, just before they say something. So don't do that. Just really try to give the player the chance to do as many decisions as they like to. Okay, once again, got some high scoring there. The clarinet will do this line so much better and blend so much better with the alto saxophone in this particular register. If it were down quite a bit, then it would be better to go to bassoon. But here, it's just really much better to have clarinet in there supporting your alto saxophone. Everything else, that's all fine. And this is very cool. I'm just, this all works pretty well. Yeah, I was gonna say something about it, but I'll change my mind. I'll just leave it where it is. That's all good. And then the little ending here. See, this is beautiful. It's very, very nice harp scoring. Right? This is probably not going to make much difference, staccato and then like slurring and everything. Those are nuances that are not going to really make that much difference on harp. But this is great. The bracket, yeah, and just that touch of piccolo up there. This is great. Really, really great stuff. So, yeah, I really enjoyed your score, Alberto. This is a great way to get into, having your score being first in line here. Just really, I always feel really optimistic after looking at one of your scores. So, really, really great way to start our whole set of Dotted Brev, Longa supporters, and thank you so much for being such a positive member of the community and supporting on Patreon and everything like that. Just it's just really, I'm so glad to be able to take that support and do something like this with it, right? Something that will help other orchestrators and give you some feedback on your career and your artistic aspirations and everything else. It's just, I think this is just a wonderful thing. So with that, thank you for your entry. Please enter into the next one and on to the next score.